Hey everybody, DJ here, and today we are going to be looking at caustics. And I'm going to be looking at this in three different render engines, just so that everybody kind of understands. And we're going to be looking at it in LuxCore, Cycles, and in AMD Radeon ProRender. Before we begin, please go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. That really helps me out. So we're going to jump inside of Blender here, and when I first started looking at this, and I got a few requests to kind of like look at this or some questions and stuff like that. I really thought this was going to be relatively easy, but I did spend actually a week or so just kind of researching and testing some things and studying how caustics work within the different render engines and also looking at things in real life. So I'm going to open up some images that I took, or some some pictures I took when I was out, and this is something that you can do. So if you take a look at this, these pictures are not the greatest or anything like that. This is just really quickly. I was out at a store and I was just observing different glass and plastics and stuff like that, and how they just kind of naturally existed in the environment. And you can see at the bottom here, caustics are, it's basically the different light paths and how they're sort of like refracted from the glass, and that reflected light effects that you see are basically that. And I can pull up the definition here, and this is on Wikipedia. And you can see here it's pretty long, and it has to do with the light rays that are reflected or refracted by a curved surface or object. So in our case here, it's glass, and here's what that looks like up close. Pretty neat effect there. And oops, let me bring this back. And you can see like this is a really good effect here. There's water, and how we've all kind of seen that. This is some different, patterns, and it kind of talks about how those rays are refracted by this curved surface here. And there's a lot of things that you can do to test this out. This in the sunlight. Here's a computer rendering of it, and all of that. And the thing is that this is, highly complex and all that. But basically, my opinion, or how I like to define this, is it's basically the light that's refracted onto a surface from a curved object like glass or something like that. And you can see here with the regular ambient light, there's really not a whole lot. You can kind of see it right here, and it is colored because of the glass, but it's not really obvious. There's a couple little effects here, but it's not really super clear what's going on. And let me open this up in a different viewer here so that it's easier for me to take a look. So let's open with earphone view. If you don't have earphone view, I highly recommend it. It's free. So if we kind of cycle through here, you can see I got closer, and you can start to see it's focused here, but you can see there's some rings right here. And here you can see that when you shine a light through it, and my wife is helping me here by putting her phone with the LED right next to it, you can see it shows those rings a lot clearer, and that's with the light right up against the glass. I didn't get that in the shot here, but basically the LED light is right next to the glass, and that's what's showing this effect here. And there's another picture of it, and there's another one there. So you can kind of see how the lighting, where it's placed, and the brightness of it actually changes how the caustics are working with this particular glass. And I took a close-up photo, so you can see that on the surface there's these very, very fine sort of like imperfections that help to push that sort of refracted glass effect. And here's another object you can see here. The caustics are very, very, slight. You can see it here, and some of it see-through right here. And it has to do with, the thickness of the glass, what kind of glass it is, if there's any sort of volume. Like here, there's a volume absorption of a green effect here. And the ambient light, you can't really tell, but once a light is shined through it really, really close, you can see that it has a completely different effect. Okay? So that's basically what caustics are and how they are in real life. Okay. So the question is, how do you replicate this in real life? Now, a lot has to do with the thickness of the glass you're making or the object that you're using. It has to do with the actual geometry. If it's just a flat object or just a very, very smooth object, you might not see these sort of effects. So the actual geometry is going to affect it. So how do we replicate that inside of Cycles or LuxCore or ProRender? And this is, I thought it was going to take me not very long to do this sort of thing, but it actually took me a lot longer than I thought. And if we just take a look here, let me just save this really quick. I approach this in a couple different ways. So here's the scene, and let me turn these on here. So I have a light that's shining through here, and I have a light that's right up close to it, kind of like the LED light of the phone. So it's really, really close to it. And I could get closer, but I kept it this distance. And then I have over here, if we look here, we have an HDRI that's at a strength of 0.2, just to give some ambient light to the scene. Okay. Now, before you can actually make the caustics visible, you need to make sure that you go down to light paths, caustics, and bump this up here. And the filter glossy here, it says adaptively blur glossy shaders after blurry bounces and stuff like that to reduce noise at the cost of accuracy. So this can actually change how those caustics are calculated. Let's just leave that as it is for the moment. And let's take a look at this. Oh, really quick, for this version, all I'm using is a normal map from the AMD Radeon ProRender material library. It's a rubber normal. So it's this lined, let me see if I can zoom in on this, large. So it's basically vertical lines here that I made, kind of similar where it just like rounds around the glass. And I use that as a normal map, and I pipe that into the glass, and then I also added a volume absorption just to see how the coloring effect is done. And if we take a look at this, and I'll throw this into the rendered view here, let's take a look and see how this is rendering. So here it is, and this is what it looks like at the moment. And if I go in here, let's do, because we just want to really just look at a particular section, we're going to crop to this spot right down in here. Okay, let's zoom in. And you can see as it's rendering out, you can start to see that effect right there on the bottom here. And you can see, even though it's a kind of not so great render, you can still see that there's a caustic effect happening. Okay, so let's test this out and see what happens when we take the filter glossy down to a 0, which basically means don't filter out any glossiness. And it basically starts to create more of the, it's actually not 0, let's go to 10. Yeah, so let's go to like 20 or something like that. 20? Oh, looks like 10 is the most. And you can see that like the more you pop that up, the more this should be sort of seen here. So if I go 0.1, you can see that you get kind of less of that effect there, at least as far as how quickly the samples are calculated. And then if you pop this up to a 10, you get more of the caustics effect. Okay? So that is one way of doing this this method here. So this is just a very simple, and I have this as a multi-scatter, but you can use any of these other ones here for the type of shading, and then a volume absorption to get that color, and then you can get a caustics effect just like that. So I'm going to put up a final render right here of what this might look like if you finish it up and, you know, we're happy with it. So this is what this version looks like. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to, or I'm going to show you how you can do this with a more complex shader. So if you looked online, you will have noticed that there is a gentleman, this individual right here, Gleb Alexandrov, who knows a lot more about glass shading than I do. And at this particular website, the Creative Shrimp website, you can actually download the file and the node setup. so you don't have to recreate it yourself. But if you want to understand, which I recommend, going through this, if you want to understand how it works and all that and how to adjust it, you can do the entire tutorial here. And I'll provide the link in the description below. But basically, I took his and I hid some sections, changed a couple things, and adjusted how the normal mapping and bumps and the volume and all that kind of stuff to be more of what I want. And this is what ended up happening with that. So you'll see right away there's quite a bit of a different effect happening with the render. You can see that there's a lot more going on as far as what's visible. You can actually see some of the ring shapes over here from the normal or bump map that's on the object. And in general, you get a lot more of, a more fun effect of these caustics. And what is really going on here, if I can open this up really quick, and I don't want to lose anybody, but right here, let me see here. So basically, what's happening is they're taking, or what's happening here is that you're taking the light path, okay? And you're basically changing how the light path into the shadow is being rendered, okay? And there's a couple different ways that this is shown. Let me see if I can. So that's the dispersion effect that I'm not using, which is fine. But basically, let me get back over to the ray length. So right here, the absorption ray length here, it's basically saying take the shadow and change it up so that it's more affected by the actual glass material in this way. So, long story short, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot more going on here, and there's a couple different ways to do it by using, there's another one where you can use a dot product and a couple other things like that to create this same sort of effect. And you can look online and find a few different ways of doing the same thing. But basically, they're altering how the shadow or the ray length, or how the shadow is being projected onto the surfaces here. Okay. And this is another area right here where it says fake caustics. That's the area that actually creates the more of this effect. So you can see right down here, it's using the normal and then the geometry here to create this dot product, and does a couple multiplies and stuff like that. And basically what this does is it uses your object information and a couple other things to create a more faked sort of like caustics effect. And this is really the way, even though this is like a lot more complicated than some others ways of doing this is really the general way that this is done inside of Cycles. So it's not really as easy in Cycles to create this super caustics looking effect here, or the fake caustics looking effect. You can see it even shines back onto the other sides over here. But this is how it's done if you want to boost your caustics. And again, I'm providing the links below on where you can find some of this information. Now, the other thing that is affecting this, and I'm going to show you it in here because it will update a lot faster than some of the other engines and other ways of doing this. I'm going to just show this section here. And I'm going to show you how the lighting is really affecting this. So if I take this little guy right here, and if we look at the caustics here, and if I start to scale this up, you'll see that the caustics are a lot more soft, okay? And then if I scale this down, like really, really, really tiny, the more, that's really ugly, but it's basically like a super, super, super tiny little light that's super bright, and it's causing this effect to happen. So if you wanted your caustics to be a lot sharper than what's currently happening or what you're currently seeing, you need to scale your lights to reflect that. Or but I don't know if that's like a pun or something, but basically the size of your lights are going to change how sharp the definition of the caustics are between the different lighting effects. So there's that one right there that I used a little area light, and then for this spot lamp that I put up here, let me increase this size here. You can see here the radius is a 0.01. If I set this at a, let's say a 0.5 or something like that, it's going to change the sharpness of all of these other caustics that are being created from this lamp right here. And let me turn off, let me just save this really quick. And I'm going to turn off this other one, and let's see what those caustics look like just with this spot lamp here, so you can see it a little bit easier. And there you can see that those are the caustics being created just by this light here and the ambient light. And if I take this down to a 0.01, like, or yeah, 0.01, you can see how sharp that ends up being. Okay. So again, the geometry of your object, the thickness of your object as far as the glass shading, and the size of your lights, how bright they are, and the way that your node setup is. And I'm sorry this is so, crazy, but this is, it's a really great shader, and I strongly recommend downloading it and keeping it. But that's basically how people are doing this faked caustics look. Okay. So here's a render of how this looks when I finished it. And let's move on to the next thing. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to keep LuxCore for last. I'm going to use ProRender next so that you guys who are my ProRender fans can take a look at that. So I'm going to switch this over to Radeon ProRender and turn on the ProRender section. Okay. Now I'm using 2.0 because 2.0 actually works better for caustics than 1.0. And this is just something I discovered. 2.0 is just better at it. The only problem is that volume absorption doesn't work. So unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see the cool colorful look, but I'm going to show you how this looks inside of ProRender. And this was actually the hardest one to get working. So I basically tried or attempted to keep the same type of lighting. I had to change it quite a bit to get it to work, or at least get it more obvious for this render engine than the other ones. So if it's a little bit off or a little bit different, sorry about that, but that's just what it is. So you can see down here, the way that it's rendering, there's a lot of fireflies, okay? And or these little points of light, which are generally called fireflies. And I have the viewport at a 50% right here. Let's change that to 75, and we will reset that so it's a little bit clearer. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure that your samples, you'll want to set these kind of high, and you'll need to set your quality. I set it at max, okay? And then down here where it says clamping, I set the clamp radiance to 37 because that was similar to what the LuxCore clamp radiance ended up being. So I wanted to try and get something a little bit similar to that. And you can see right here, and it's a little bit hard to tell with this, previewer, but you can see right there, that's where the caustics are, right here, and in this section right over here. Okay. And I'm going to go a little bit closer, and just remember that this is still in beta, and I have a review of the more recent. I'm actually using the newest build that was available for weekly, but I do have a review of one of the weekly builds, and I'll put a card in right here so you can check that out if you'd like. But you can see right there, that's where the caustics are, and they're not as cool as they were in Cycles. With that other shader. And if we take a look at the shader that's being used here, it's very simple. I have the normal map here, and then here is the glass. And you need to make sure that you check on this allow caustics right here. Otherwise, if you don't, if I take that off, you can see that it doesn't actually do anything as far as the refractive shadows and anything like that. So clicking that on does change very much how everything is rendered as far as glass is concerned. And it also says that in order for the caustics to work properly, that you need to make sure that there's at least a little bit of roughness on it. I found that that doesn't really matter, and that the caustics kind of show up regardless if there's any roughness on there. But I don't know. And you can see right here, refraction, absorption distance, it's set it at 2. So we should actually see an absorption here, but the current 2.0 does not allow for volumetrics at the moment. So that's why you're not seeing any colorful glass or whatever. But you still do get a pretty nice little render, and here's what it looks like. I set my samples to like 1500, I think, for this. And it's at a 4K, and then it's, for YouTube, it's downsampled to 1080p. But that's basically what I did there. I just set the samples to max, so like 50, and then the samples to 1500, and the uh, in the area where you can do your clamping, I set it to a 37, and I got something similar to this. So if you need to or want to use ProRender, this is currently the best way to do it. And looking back into Blender right here, there is no way to get light paths right now. So if I go in here and I go to, let's see, RPR lookup, which has some interesting stuff like UV maps and stuff like that, there isn't a light path here. And if it is one of these, I'm not aware that it actually does what it's supposed to. Okay. So there's no way to actually, if you get like, geometry or something like that, there's no way to actually get that light path information for your shadows and to make a custom boosted caustics effect. You just can't do it in here yet. So hopefully they figure that out soon, or they add some way of you being able to boost the caustics in the Uber node for glass. I don't know. That's just not something that I think they're worried about at the moment. Um, and this is also in beta, so it could change a lot between now and when it's actually fully released. So let's jump into another engine, and this is the one that I'd say if you don't care about render passes and you don't care about having to have it in cycles, this is what you want to do. You want to use LuxCore. And before you actually can see the effects, and I will turn it off just so you can see. Let's see, where is it here? Light paths, light tracing. Okay, so if we take a look at this here, and this is not a crash course on this engine or anything like that. I'm just explaining how this works in different programs or different engines. So if we take a look at how this looks currently in this render, you can see it's kind of bland. There's not really a whole lot going on. It's what you would see in any of the other ones. You can see that it's filling in right here. With the caustic effect, if we zoom in a little bit, you can see that there is not really a whole lot happening. There's a little bit of the caustics being rendered here, but not really a whole lot. Well, the easy thing to do in this engine, and again, this is specifically to LuxCore, is that they have this setting right here that's called Add Light Tracing. And before I do that, I'm just going to click on the object and I'm going to show you what the materials looks like. And in here, you actually have to use this. I mean, you don't have to, but it's better if you do it. The LuxCore material nodes, because they have a different way of doing things. And in here, you can see that there's a glass material. This is the settings that I have. I don't have a dispersion on it. I can show you what that looks like in a second. But you can see that it's pretty simple. I have a volume that's put in there. And then down here, I have the bump map or the normal map that I'm using to create a bumpy surface here with these rings. Okay. So if I take this, I'm just going to show you what this does right here, this dispersion. If I take this and I put this to a 0.01, you can see that it starts to add a dispersion effect, which basically separates the red, green, and blue channels into different colors. Okay. So it basically creates this dispersion effect down here that you would see like in crystal or something like that. And you can see it kind of here. I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can kind of see what it looks like. Um, and there you have those effects being rendered. Hopefully this is visible on YouTube, but if you download this, and I'll put the link to the in the description to where you can download this engine, you can play with this and see everything that it does. So the main thing here that I want to show you is how with this click of a button, in quote, you can basically add a whole different effect to the caustic. So if I turn this on, we should be able to see a very different effect here. And let's actually reset the engine. Let's go here and then go back to here, and we should see a very different effect. So there you go. You can see that there are completely different sets of, refracted light, or these caustics, that we'd seen on any of the other engines so far. And this is actually far more accurate than the other ones, because the other ones are kind of faking it to, make it look more like what it should look like. This, for some reason, or, this is just how they created this engine, you can really see those refracted light rays off of the object. And I'm just going to turn off dispersion here because I don't think it's really important to what I'm trying to show you. And you can see right there, there's the coloring effect from the volume that's from within here. And you can very clearly see the rings right here from the object, or from the bumpy surface. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the clipped area here, just so you can see how some of this looks on the other parts of the background and everything. So if I take a look at this in the rendered view again, we can take a look at that, and you can see that that effect is very clear and obvious right through here, and throughout the scene we get that really neat caustics effect. And the same rules apply here as far as the size of your lighting and how clear this stuff shows up. So if I take this lamp and I go and I change the size of it here to a 0.5, you can see that it's not so obvious. Do you see that? It's not as obvious, those rings. Okay, it's more diffused. And that's because the lamp is much larger, so it makes sense that it wouldn't be as sharp in those the obvious caustics that are being cast there. You may have seen this right here, this little laser thing. I'm not going to use it. It basically creates a laser beam effect where it shoots a ray of light straight forward, whatever the direction is, and it will make some really cool effects. I'm not going to show that in here because I think most people aren't really going to use this sort of thing, and I might show this in some other tutorial later. But basically, if you want to have realistic glass effects with all these caustics and stuff, you can use those other methods that I showed you earlier. But really, LuxCore is the engine that's going to give you what you need. And the great thing is that it's free, so you can download it and use it as much as you want and get really great effects. There are some limitations. There aren't as many render passes as some people want, and there are some, reasons why you may not want to use it. And you can check out my render engine comparisons videos to check it out, especially when it comes to volumetrics. It tends to be extremely slow when it comes to some volumetric renderings, but hopefully this gives you an idea about what kind of engine you want to use for your scene when you're creating something that actually has caustics and stuff like that. So that's going to be it, and hopefully it helps to explain to you how you can actually get these really neat effects in your glass as far as caustics and stuff like that. I'm going to show right now a couple of the different render passes that I did with the different engines. And this isn't a one-to-one comparison video or anything like that, so I'm not going to provide any, times and, all of the details as I normally would. But this sort of gives you an idea about what you can expect to see when you use these different render engines, and how you can change up your node structure and cycles, and what you can expect when you're trying to create glass in ProRender, and how, uh, to be frank, awesome LuxCore is at rendering out caustics and making your scene look amazing if glass and caustics is what you really want to see. So thanks a lot for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you found this helpful, and if there are any sort of tutorials you'd like to see me do, and I'll see you next time on DJ Tutorials.